chairman is out. We do not have a quorum for this meeting, which technically means we can't vote on anything, which these are mostly discussion topics tonight, so we're going to go ahead and start and follow the agenda here. But the committee will not have any votes here on approving minutes or anything like that, so just let it be. Acting chairman. We have a pledge of allegiance. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. The first item we have here is public comments. Any member of the public, any comment? None. Next item, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting.
You
can't. We can't vote. So new business presentation, Walsh Road.
Yes, I can speak. Is Mr. Lago Marcino here by chance tonight?
We have Eric from...
This is a different
sorry,
issue.
my mistake.
So Mr. Lago Marcino, who lives on Broadacres and Walsh Road, I think over about a year ago, had requested a couple no stopping signs on Walsh Road, which would be on the north side of Walsh Road, just
east of Broadacres.
Broadacres. The concern is with the construction of the school, parents and staff have been stopping and letting kids out. There's really no room for it. It is a safety issue, and I believe it's going to be something that continues even when the school project is done, because it's easier to drop kids out there than to go through the loop. So he'd requested 2 no stopping signs, which Traffic Sergeant Kokler had reviewed, Public Works had reviewed, and our recommendation is install both of those signs.
So,
Can you speak a little louder? It's hard to hear.
Sorry, I'm speaking that way, so.
Chief, do you want to sit here then?
Yeah, no, it's fine. What part did you miss?
Most of it.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. A gentleman who is a longtime resident on Broadacres, right off of Walsh Road, had requested 2 no stopping signs in the area of his residence because parents and staff from the school are dropping their kids off, and there really is no room to get off the road. It is kind of a safety issue. Contributed to the construction, but our belief is even when construction is done, parents will continue to use that because it's easier than going through the traffic loop. So he's requested 2 signs, which we concur should be installed. Public Works has requested they be installed, and that's our recommendation to the committee.
So we're going to have the funding for it.
Oh yes, absolutely. It's
Shall we move on to the next? Walsh Road and Alameda de la Puntas.
I'm going to pull that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Holm. I'm the Director of Bond Projects for the Los Alamitos School District. We initially had planned to come before you to discuss the parking lot realignment and traffic signal installation at Walsh Road and Alameda. We had, as a school district, we've been working with the town staff for quite some time on this, and we had a community meeting last Tuesday, and we received some very good feedback. A lot of feedback, a lot of questions, and at this point we've heard the neighbors, and we want to take some time to actually be able to address their concerns. And so we'd like to pause the process at the moment. So we're not going to present anything to you tonight because we need to take the time to consider the comments from the neighbors. So that's all I have to present or say. Thank you.
So we don't have any
No.
high-level concerns
No.
at this time.
Can you just give us a kind of summary of what the neighbors' concerns were?
I
think that's what most of the people are here for.
There was a lot of points brought up, a lot of concerns, and we're continuing to get some of that feedback as the neighbors sent it to us. And so they brought up some good points, some good alternate suggestions, and we want to take a minute to reflect on that. And so I think it'd be premature to address any of those concerns at this point. But we want.
I was just asking what they were. I was
Yeah.
If you wanted a sort of a summary and then some comments by people who were there, the Almanac article online that mentions the meeting has
be publishing those list of concerns? I mean, not addressing, not about how we're going to address the concerns, but
We haven't gotten that far in the analysis. Like I said, we just had the meeting last week. We've got a board meeting tomorrow night that we've also been preparing for, and so we have not had a chance to address those yet, those concerns, and we are taking a moment to reflect on those. So, okay?
yes, please.
Public comment?
Yes, please. Though, of course, typically agenda-wise, we reserve it for the end, right? Shall we do that, or shall we take the comments right now?
I think if he's done with the presentation, take their comments
Yeah, so then.
and then move on.
Please go ahead. Please.
I'll be brief, and Eric, thank you, because we appreciate you kind of taking a step back. I think that was certainly my request. Just as way of background, which as you move forward in this process, I'm sure there'll be more discussion. The current alignment at the school and configuration was put into place about 15 years ago, a little bit over 15 years ago, and I acted as the liaison between the school district, town of Atherton, and the county, because they have, it's a multi-jurisdictional issue there. And at that point in time, there were a few things that occurred. The first was a curb cut onto the Alameda, the purpose of which at the time was to be a right turn only onto the Alameda for school bus traffic only. That front loading area was to be for school bus drop off, and then they could exit to the right only. And the reason for that was they knew that the left-hand turn activity would cause congestion. The next condition was that that curb cut not align with Walsh Road, so as to not mix the residential traffic on Walsh with the school activity. The next was the installation further down the Alameda of a pedestrian lighted crosswalk. The county dictated that location. That was the only place they would agree to it, and the reason was they wanted to move it away from the intersection of Camino Al Lago and the Alameda, because they felt that that was so congested. The last element that was put into place was Barney Lane, which is down towards the end of the property line on Camino Al Lago. It was closed off to vehicular traffic. That used to be open, so that used to be another path of travel. So that actually pinched traffic back to the Camino Al Lago Alameda intersection. That's the net result. But the important thing is, since then, for whatever reason, parent traffic, car drop-off traffic, and buses mix in that zone now. The right-hand, there used to be a right-hand turn only sign. That's gone. All the striping is different. And so everyone's going every which way. So the basic premise on which it was put into place has shifted over the years. The other thing was the series of other crosswalks along the Alameda were to be abandoned in favor of the one lighted pedestrian. Those have been, again, kind of repainted over the years. So it's a little bit of a mishmash now, but I think just a little bit of historical background will be helpful as we go through the process, and hopefully work with the district to come up with kind of a sensible solution that still kind of protects the neighborhood. All right.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Taya Henry Hamilton. I live on Tallwood Court off of Welsh. I went to Las Lomitas, actually. I'm glad Mr. Shepard is bringing up the county issue, because Eric didn't discuss this and no one else did, and I asked. There was not a single county representative at the meeting. I know from other projects I've been aware of that getting approval from the county to do anything is an excruciatingly long process, and I'm just asking if the town of Atherton can help Las Lomitas expedite things with the county, because the light, people pointed out at the meeting, and it's true, that because that current pedestrian light is mid-block, a lot of cars go right through it. They're not expecting it, and they go right through it. So it's incredibly dangerous, and it was supposed to keep kids safe. The other thing brought up at that meeting, which was important, was that they don't need to reinvent the wheel here. And if you just look at Hillview, they have done it well because they are on Santa Cruz, which is not even as busy as Alameda, but is an artery for traffic. But they enter on Elder, and they keep cars and pedestrians separate, which is what's important. So at the meeting, many of us were asking them to please figure out a way to get the light at, because I think there should be a light, but the light should be at Camino al Lago. And that you could have, in different configurations, cars entering on Camino al Lago and doing a loop, and then have a pedestrian safe way to get to school from Barney. You've already got vehicles blocked on Barney, so it's kind of the perfect way to direct bikes and kids walking. But the other thing is that when you look at that whole situation, it seems pretty clear that there needs to be a sidewalk on the southern side of Camino al Lago so that students are more out of the path of cars, again, if they're walking around that corner. And again, that's a county issue. And so I'm just wondering to what extent the plan that Las Lomitas came up with, without any input from any citizens whatsoever, if they made that plan because it was expedient not to have to deal with the county. And I mean, expedient versus a good design is just, it's no contest. It should be a good design. But I understand how hard it is to deal with the county. So I'm just asking if Atherton in some form can lobby the county to help Las Lomitas get this done in a good way.
Thank you.
Any other comments, anyone?
How will we get a notice?
I'm Rod, Rod Shepard. We both live at 398 Walsh Road, and her question was, how will we get a notice of the future meetings? Because this came to us late, obviously, and we haven't had much time. But I'm going to add one comment that was sort of spoken to at the meeting that I think is important, and that is safety. Bringing K through 3 kids to a minor arterial is not safe, and no other school in Atherton does that. You look at Laurel, you look at MA, you look at Encinal, you look at then Hillview in the Menlo Park School District, and you look at Selby Lane over on Selby Lane, and they all take the kids away from the arterial. And that's why it's been safe. That's why, as far as I know, there haven't been any accidents. I asked we've had kids there since 2000 and nephews there since until last year. And has anybody ever heard of an accident at Las Lomitas? And the only answer we got back was the only accident has come in the parking lot at Lontrada. So we've got a safe situation now. Let's not mess it up by making it an arterial situation. So that's the general comment that I think a lot of people share with Eric, and hopefully he considers.
So to answer your question on the schedule of the meetings, so the regular schedule is the second Tuesday of every alternate month. So second Tuesday of May next. And it's also published on our township website.
But you, there's no way to get noticed, residents to get a notice in the mail, or do we just have to check the website to see, or Eric, do you have a system for?
Any resident that left their email address at that meeting, we will email.
Perfect, okay. That's helpful, thank you.
Any more comments?
Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Obviously, issue.
Thank you. Yeah, May.
We have some answers, Eric.
That weird pedestrian crossing signal, which isn't ours, that's going to go away from us.
So once, if they put a traffic light up, the news is nothing goes away.
Yeah, that's a weird, I've never seen it like that.
That would have made more sense.
So, can we move on to next agenda item, Selby Lane?
Yeah, good evening. My name is Mike Kashwagi, and I'm part of the engineering staff at the town of Atherton. So I'm here this evening at the request of the City Council to provide to the Transportation Committee an update on a number of studies that the town has been doing in collaboration with Caltrans and San Mateo County with regards to improving safety at the El Camino Real, Selby Lane. So your staff report, I think, we tried to provide a pretty comprehensive description of kind of the blow-by-blow of what's been going on for the last couple of years. So as part of this presentation, I was just going to kind of go over some of the highlights. So this graph here shows kind of the history. So this.
Okay, Eric, I'm sorry, it's really hard to hear. If you guys mind just stepping outside for a minute, thank you.
So this discussion started probably 4 or 5 years ago when Caltrans came to the town of Atherton after taking a look at accident information at this intersection. And basically the accident information they shared was over a 10-year period that I think extended from about 2001 to 2011, identified 50 accidents occurring at these intersections. As a result of that, this intersection met warrants, and Caltrans was recommending installation of a traffic signal. When this came to City Council, Council heard some concerns from residents in the area, concerned that a signal would attract cars onto Selby Lane, and was not in favor of that. So the council asked staff to take a look at any and all other alternatives other than a signal to try to improve the safety of this intersection for pedestrians and for bicyclists and vehicles. Around I think it was around April, thereabouts of 2015, the town initiated meetings with Caltrans and San Mateo County to talk about this intersection. And basically the reason why we reached out to those two agencies is because this intersection is actually under jurisdictional control of all three. It's the west leg of Selby, of course, is with the town of Atherton. El Camino Real is part of Caltrans. Okay.
Who was on this one?
That must have been,
We'll try. Give it a moment here. While he's waiting, I will say, I would not have last year have thought this was a big deal, but for about 6 weeks in January and February, we had to move out and rented at corporate apartments, Oakwood Apartments on El Camino, across from near Target.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were driving back and forth for a few weeks while we did that. And I got to drive by that every day, dropping my daughter at school, going into the park. The near accidents I saw almost every single day, the crazy things people would do coming out of Selby Lane or turning into Selby Lane off of El Camino. It was just crazy.
Hello?
Hi, Mr. Lover.
What I'm curious about
This is okay. I'm going to conference you back in. Okay.
crossing. Thank you. I'm in Jamaica where they connected to. If I need to connect it again, if I were to use a Skype call, then most likely to get disconnected, so it would be better for me to call you next time.
Okay. Do you have the number here?
We go to Jamaica.
Yes.
Okay.
We did the same. Thanks.
Okay, so I'll continue. Since about May of 2015, the three agencies have been working together, thinking of different ideas to improve the intersection, and we came up with some ideas that all three agencies were able to support. And with that information, we went out and we had a community meeting with the residents in the vicinity of El Camino Real and Selby Lane. This community meeting was broadly advertised, so we had people in attendance from not only the town of Atherton, but Redwood City, as well as San Mateo County. And that occurred in February of 2016. At the meeting, different alternatives were proposed or were shared with the residents in attendance, and basically through a process, they voted on what they felt, what they liked the best. And through that process, two alternatives came out as clearly as the top vote getters. One was to signalize the intersection, and then the other one was basically an alternative where we limited movements of vehicles in and out of the intersection through the use of medians. After that was done, then Caltrans asked that some additional analysis were done on those two alternatives because their concern was to make sure that it didn't adversely impact operation of El Camino Real or the operations of the existing traffic signal at 5th Avenue and El Camino Real. Based on, after we did some additional analysis, it was reviewed by Caltrans. Basically, Caltrans didn't have any killer concerns of either alternative. They were able, although they preferred the traffic signal, they indicated that they could live with either. So with that information, we then had a second community meeting with the residential community in the Selby ECR area, and that occurred in November of 2017, I believe. And as a result of that meeting, we got a lot of mixed opinions of which alternative they liked. And the bottom line there is that there wasn't any consensus on a preferred project. And actually, we had a third meeting in December 2017. The reason we had the third meeting is because the meeting that we had in October, we had a noticing issue, and so as a result of that, residents within Atherton were not properly notified. So as a result of that, we redid the meeting in December. When we did that, it was the same results, that very mixed, and clearly there was no consensus. So when you take a look at the issue, what this diagram shows is basically all the movements that's possible today because it's an uncontrolled intersection. So you can see there's a lot of conflict points, and that's really the cause of the accidents that are occurring. One of the things, since by November of 2017, the original traffic action information that was presented by Caltrans became kind of old and stale. So in November 2017, the Atherton Police Department, Sergeant Kokler, went through and
Is that Gary trying to dial back in? Hello? Hello? Gary? Gary?
Yes, sorry, I keep getting disconnected. I think this will be done now.
Alright, are you both there?
Gary's here.
Mike, are you there?
I'm here. Yep, I'm here.
okay. So because the Caltrans action information became kind of old and outdated, in November 2017, Sergeant Kokler went through and did a detailed research of accidents in basically the 10-year period from 2007 to 2017, and these were the results. That there was a total of 69 reported accidents at that intersection. 63 were vehicular, 6 bicycle. There were no pedestrian reported accidents. Of the 63 vehicular, 45% were rear-end collisions, 33% were broadside collisions, 30% of the collisions resulted in injuries, and there was 1 fatality. This diagram here just kind of shows by movement the number of accidents. So for instance, the number 17 on the bottom, what that shows is that cars turning left out of Selby onto El Camino Real, there were 17 accidents as a result of that movement. And when you take a look at all these accidents, probably most, if not all, were related to turning movements. Even, for instance, that there's a 14 on the left-hand side. Well, those were rear-end collisions. We don't know exactly the cause, but it could be left-turning vehicle, car going, through on ECR, had to come to an abrupt stop, got rear-ended. So, that's where, we believe that most, if not all, of the collisions are due to some sort of turning movement.
very small number of people turning, going west and turning left. Is that just a volume issue, you assume? Because there's just not nearly as much traffic, I would think.
Yes, there's very few people actually turning left into the county portion of Selby Lane. And similarly, there's very few people leaving the county portion of Selby Lane onto ECR in comparison to people who are, turning into the Atherton portion of ECR, and primarily because of the school, right? So, when you take a look at the, action history, we believe a lot of it can be attributed to, just poor visibility, lack of gaps in traffic. The volume at ECR is about 37,000 vehicles a day. Vehicular speeds are, if they're abiding by the speed limit, they're going 45 or 35 to 40 miles per hour. And because it isn't regulated, at some point people get impatient, they take a chance, and accident occurs. So, again, the improvement options that, we really haven't narrowed down to that all agencies can support is the signalized intersection and the restricted movements. And when you think about it, I mean, it makes sense. By signalizing it or restricting the movements, you really eliminate the amount of movements, which should reduce the amount of accidents. So that's the signalization option. This is one of the median options. And this option, basically, the only left turning movements that's allowed under this option is people northbound ECR turning left into the Atherton portion of Selby Lane. And then a similar alternative where this alternative allows left turn movements into Selby, into both sides of Selby Lane. Go back. So
in that model, people coming out of the county portion of Selby Lane who are trying to use the school, they just need to turn right and they go down and make a U-turn at the light at
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And similarly, Selby to the other side of ECR, they'd have to
You go to Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, correct. But as part of the studies, we did take intersection traffic counts, and I'm not. There might have been a few, but the people who are actually going from Selby to Selby directly across ECR, very, very few. Okay.
There are pedestrians there.
ECR.
There's a crossing guard.
There's pedestrians, and the school has a crossing guard. Okay.
Is this under alternative one? It seems like you have a much wider island for
Yes.
pedestrians in the middle.
Yes.
Safety and
Alternative one does provide that pedestrian refuge where, pedestrians can safely cross half the street and then cross the other half of the street. And actually, this alternative would, you can also install a hawk beacon also to assist, so they have a controlled way to get across the street, or a rapid flashing beacon to, assist with pedestrian getting across the street. So where we are now is that there's really just one of these alternatives that all three agencies can support, and that's alternative 2. San Mateo County does not support alternative 1 because it does not allow left turn in to the county portion.
I'm sorry I had to miss this, but I'm very interested in this because my son broke his arm and got hit by a car in Selby, and that wasn't reported, and I can tell you more about that later. I went to the police. Who was not in favor of a real traffic signal? Atherton?
No, there was a lot of residents who just were not in favor of it. And to be honest, we didn't take a poll to see how many of these people were from Atherton versus Redwood City versus San Mateo County.
Okay. Because, there isn't an intersection. There's Fifth Avenue, and then it's like 0.6 miles to the next intersection, which is kind of insane. And those hawk lights, those 3 flashy things like on Almondrell, people don't see those.
So the whole point in these collaborative meetings and analysis that's been doing is to see if there's a supportable project, from all three agencies. And so, where we are today is that really the only alternative that's been presented that is supportable by all three agencies is this alternative 2. Okay.
So do the agencies have any objections to the signaling there, or is it only citizens that have objections to the signaling?
Well, the signal is Caltrans preferred, and I think I think residents, you know, depending on where you live, and depending on your perception as far as how that signal will affect driver circulation, you know, people are gonna be opposed to it.
Right, so it says essentially the citizens that are objecting to the signals, not the agencies.
Yeah, from a technical standpoint, you know, I think as engineers, as non-residents, the traffic signal is a good solution. Yes. And then so when we also revisited accident information to kind of bring it up to date, we also, because we had heard at our October community meeting about, you know, bicycle fatalities and bicycle accidents. So, you know, because we realized that all those may not have occurred at that intersection, we took a look at the segment on ECR from Selby Lane all the way down to Stockbridge. And this is what, you know, we found is that in that 10-year period, there were 28 reported accidents, 6 at ECR, Selby, and they were all bicycle accidents. There were 14 reported accidents at Fifth Avenue ECR, 5 bicycle, 9 pedestrian. 1 reported at Amherst ECR, and 7 accidents reported at Stockbridge in ECR, 5 bicycle and 2 pedestrians. Okay. So, the other thing that when we took this to City Council in January, in addition to the City Council wanting us to come and share this information and brief the Transportation Committee, they also asked that we, let's see, go back to the very first slide, is probably the best way to show it, is that we install a crosswalk on the Selby leg, or on the Atherton leg of Selby, to assist, you know, pedestrians to cross Selby's to get to the existing crosswalk that crosses El Camino Real. So that's going to be done. The town is going to be doing a number of striping projects in early spring, and so this crosswalk will be installed as part of that. The other thing that the council requested is to ask for no U-turns, so that vehicles turning left from ECR onto Selby, which either direction, that they're not allowed to make a U-turn. So, of course, ECR is under jurisdiction and control of Caltrans, so that request has been made to Caltrans. They're currently reviewing and studying that, and we expect an answer from Caltrans within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
I'm sorry, is that request under the current configuration or under what scenario here? Because
It's under the current configuration.
okay. So if the decision was made to signalize it, that might be taken off if there was a left turn signal.
Correct. Yeah, if there was a signal, there'd be a U-turn would be, in all likelihood, be allowed, because there'd be plenty of room for a U-turn there. And then the other thing is that what came up in 1 or 2 of the community meetings was people were hearing about a senior living, a new senior project that was being proposed in San Mateo County. And so we contacted the county, and yes, there is a 90-unit senior living community project being proposed, basically on the east side of El Camino Real, between Selby Lane and Berkshire Lane. So what that is basically where the crosswalk is at Selby, and if you go up to the top of the screen, that next intersection, that's Berkshire. So,
Is that north? Is up north?
yeah, up is north.
90.
Yeah, 90.
19.
90.
Oh, 90, okay.
90. And that project is currently under review at San Mateo County. But there hasn't been, to our knowledge, it hasn't been formally approved, and it's still working through the process. But there's it's county staff feels there's a pretty strong possibility that that project will get approved and built.
So we're putting it next to Bentley's?
Or instead of Bentley's.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the way it was explained to me that basically existing buildings there would be demolished. And I think there's a Planned Parenthood,
Next.
next to Bentley, so that would have to be removed and relocated as well. Okay.
Last vote again.
So you guys are going to Gary, back?
Yes.
Jim, you there? All right, Mike?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
Great. Sorry about my long delay. I had a hard time finding a place to do the activity.
So I'm sorry to finish, and so where do things stand right at the moment? I didn't really quite get.
Well, at this point, there's nothing being proposed. And that's something that we need to, get some guidance as to whether or not the town wants to pursue a project there.
So it sounds like what we heard is all the jurisdictions are fine with signalization, and the only alternative other than that the jurisdictions could all agree to is alternative 2.
No, the jurisdictions.
Unspecified residents didn't want the signal.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
not-
Clear.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but all the jurisdictions said they were okay with the signal, but the residents had some issue with it.
Well, I wouldn't. I don't want to speak for the county.
Okay.
But they had, and I think, the town would be in the same situation as that if, affected residents would be in opposition, that's an important consideration.
And is there an action item left of this, or it's just fizzled out?
This was, but at this point, it's just for information.
I guess, how do you gauge, citizens' objection? You have hearings, but we didn't know where people lived that were objecting to it. So, I mean, I don't know how the city council takes a position without knowing how specifically Atherton residents would feel about it. Is there?
Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we had the community meetings. And again, we invited all the residents in the area. But yes, we didn't, although we knew, and in fact, in your staff report, it identifies for each meeting how many, the folks in attendance, if they lived in the county, in River City versus Atherton. But, we didn't ask for vote by jurisdiction.
It's just an odd one, because the usual situation you get into is most of the citizens want a traffic light for safety reasons and things, and the cities, the jurisdictions usually can't afford it and they don't want to do it, so this is such an odd one to have.
Well, but no, in my experience, people, in residential areas, people are concerned about signals because the concern is that it's going to draw additional traffic. In some cases, I believe it does.
No, but regardless, to me, what's curious is that if there's no way that there is a record of, how many citizens are pro and how many citizens are for, and how does a decision ever get made?
Well, I mean, ultimately, this decisions are made by city councils.
Right. No, it was a question of, again, I guess the answer is, we're just saying is, you like Atherton City Council to decide this based on what Atherton residents think, and we have a forum, you don't actually know who's saying, if the people standing up and complaining are all people who live in the county and don't like it because they kind of shoot across here, would the city council feel different? Would our town council feel different about it?
Well, but San Mateo County would also have say because
Mhm.
part of the
No,
intersection is in the county.
May I, so my first statement really is about data. So I can tell you right now that you should add a number to the bicycle accidents, and that would be 7. My son was hit in the morning of October 2nd, broke his arm. It was luckily not a hit and run. The guy who hit him felt terrible. He was taking his kid over to Everest, right, which is a charter high school on 5th, which has at least a couple hundred students, right? Some people also are coming from the county area down by like Encina, Rutherford, and they come down Selby. They also take that, they get over to 5th to get to Summit as well, so they don't have to deal with Woodside Road. The thing that worries me is I keep wondering who's keeping track of accidents, because after I took my son to the hospital,
later, I don't know, around 1 p.m., I went to the Atherton Police. I spoke with Officer Gatto, and I asked, do we need to file a report? Do we need to do something? And he said, no, we'll make a note of it. Us doing a report right now would slow up your process. It sounds like the guy who hit him has already reported it to his insurance. We have a hospital record, so the record is there. Except I'm wondering how things get. I mean, I found out from Sarah Muse at CCAG, because I was asking, like, who keeps track? Because I find out from the almanac, I find out from reading the almanac, or because people tell me. So I only know from speaking to Officer Gatto that morning that the same morning, October 2nd, there was a hit and run on Atherton Avenue, and a 28-year-old male biking west had to be taken to the hospital. And the only reason they knew what kind of car to look for was that part of the bumper was still at the scene. So a car hit him severely enough that the bumper was still there, but I didn't see that reported anywhere. So I did see something in the almanac about a woman jogging on December 21st and getting struck by a hit-and-run driver on Berry Lane. So again, I don't understand, someone has to report the data to Caltrans for them to have any of that data. So to me, this is, my guess is that this is all underreported and that it's probably worse. And I think it makes sense that Caltrans is for a light. I'm for a light. And the reason Caltrans would be for a light is that they've already had to pay $8 million twice to 2 different families of fatality victims on the El Camino. So it definitely makes sense for them to do it. It could have been much worse with my son. Getting off with a broken arm was like easy peasy compared to what could have happened. And it was because he was trying to cross over to Tony, who is the crossing guard, who is wonderful, who stayed with him, gave him a piece of candy, calmed him down until I got there from my house. But when people are trying to turn right onto the El Camino, they keep inching out to see. They're looking at oncoming traffic, and that's what happened with Daniel, who's the one who hit Angus. He didn't even see him on the right. So the reason that recommendation, I can tell you for a fact, that recommendation for the crosswalk there on the Selby stretch is because Rick DeGolia was the only one who responded to my email to the town. And we met for breakfast and we drew maps of that. And he said, yes, there absolutely should be. The other thing about Selby, there's going to be traffic. There's a school. There's a K-8 school there. There's like 600 students at that school. I mean, whoever is saying that a light is going to add more traffic hasn't been on that street and seen the stop-and-go traffic in the morning and in the evening when people are going back to their homes in County, by Rutherford, West Selby, whatever that is. The other thing is, I looked at the report and I think Interwest was part of this. The council approved it in August of 2014. It was a really great master plan, bicycle pedestrian master plan. It was really thorough, good document. And there were lists of things that needed to be done that were on the priority list. And bicycle lanes on Selby was one of those things. And they admitted in the report, so now there's like public record, that it's inadequate. That the fact that there are no bike lanes on a major artery to a school with 600 kids, the fact there aren't bike lanes is completely out of compliance with state code and probably Caltrans too, but definitely with Ed Code and state transportation code. So, but that wasn't on the priority list. There was a second list about things we're going to use the $2 million for, and instead what it got used for was painting the sharrows on the ground. So the other thing I have to say, accidents also happen even when they're not collisions, because the boy with whom my son used to ride to school, he broke his arm a month before Angus did, actually 6 weeks before, end of August, because someone was driving on Selby, not on the El Camino, on Selby, because a car was driving so close to him that he had to get out of the way suddenly. And since there isn't a bike lane, there isn't any, it's the lip of the asphalt and then the gravel, and if you hit a bumpy spot, his bike flipped. So he broke his arm. The car didn't know they'd done anything. They sped away. But meanwhile, that's an accident. But it doesn't necessarily get reported. And if the Atherton police aren't keeping track of it, I don't know who is, because I'm pretty sure that Corsa's mom contacted the police about it. But So when I was a kid, the Atherton Police had a whole bike safety thing that they did. They came to Las Lomitas, they set up they set up a course with cones in the parking lot to make sure we could all ride our bikes safely. There was a weekend bike-a-thon through the entire town that the police sponsored, and you got people to sponsor you for miles and stuff like that. So I think this is a situation, if it's safety, that the police could be more involved with. Because reporting it after the fact isn't going to change driving behavior. So.
Thank you. Do we need to build a middle field bike lane?
That's
Do we have-
the next item.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I brought the poster from the second city council meeting. It's got the 95% plans. I believe Marty probably hosted the January 9th city council to discuss the 65. So this is pretty similar. It's just there's a few pedestrian enhancements, such as the detectable warning strips weren't included previously, and then some crossing at I think it was notified that it was Fair Oaks Lane that was notified the city council. So this is basically the same presentation as before. It's just got the 95% and the latest schedule on it. I think it's
coming.
okay. One of the main differences between the 65 and the 95 is that we've eliminated the Ringwood intersection from the project. This is all completely under Menlo Park's jurisdiction. We're going to have a left turn bike box at this intersection, but Menlo Park doesn't agree with it because it's in their area and they have other plans for that intersection. So they do not approve of it, but the Ravenswood intersection, they are going to be working with us, which is a left turn into their area. And then the bike lanes that go southbound. This is just a summary of what enhancements we're doing, which is the 5-foot minimum bike lanes. There's going to be a bike buffer between Encinal and Glenwood. Instead of the RRFB, the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, we're going to be doing an LED enhanced crossing sign since FHWA doesn't approve the RRFB anymore. There's copyright issues for it, but the actual signal is still functional and approved for doing an LED enhanced crossing sign.
I'm sorry, that's at.
This is going to be at the Glenwood intersection.
Okay.
This is actually an image of it, but the LED signs are going to be on this side, which is on the north end of the project.
So, and this will be a crosswalk across.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah, so I'll show you the
across
plans,
Middlefield.
and you'll see it's on the north
Okay.
leg. And then there's going to be bike boxes and sharrows leading up to the left turns. This is the 95% plans, which are also on the poster over here. And see, Glenwood is, Encinal, Glenwood's here. So the LED signs are going to be on the north side, and they're going to be similar. We have some signs in Menlo Park that are the RRFBs. It's a sign on both approaches so that they can see it going northbound and southbound.
So, so they push a button and it flashes?
Yeah.
Is that what happens?
Correct. I don't know, have you taken a look at the 95% plans, or did you have any questions regarding the 65 that you saw that you wanted to talk about today? No, you had some questions that you wanted? I thought you said you had serious questions. Okay. And then the schedule, this is also just a close-up of two things that we're going to be doing. The first one is just going to be the bike buffers. It's just to give a little extra room for the bicyclists that are going northbound and southbound between the schools. So Encinal and Menlo Atherton High is on the south end. The most that we could do without impacting drainage features and the trees would be to stop it at Glenwood. So the southern half doesn't have it on both sides, it just has it on one.
So on the so southbound on the Middlefield past Glenwood, you can't widen it enough is the issue.
Yeah, so actually, let's see. Yeah, on this side it's there's a lot of trees on the east side, so it's abutting right against it. So it's not capable of doing it unless you remove the trees, and that's being maintained by the residents, even though I think Atherton owns them. So one of the key things is to minimize impact to trees. So that's not possible without impacting it in some way.
And most of the kids ride on the other side of the trees.
Yeah, they ride on the pedestrian sidewalk, right?
Yeah. So that's why we wanted to try to make as much improvements as we can so that they
Dirt path.
yeah, so that they do it more safely, because we don't want to impact bicyclists and pedestrians at the same time. So this was a way of making them feel safer to ride it more appropriately, which is in the street, within the bike lanes. So 2-foot buffers. And then the second major improvement would be at Marsh Road, which originally it was, you can see the existing striping, the bicyclists were cutting in front of the right turn lane. Now they're gradually coming out and then in line with their approach across the street. And then the vehicles have to make sure that they're aware and overlap the bicyclists.
This is current, right? I mean, this is already implemented.
You see the gray is current. So right now there's a green bike lane where it goes behind the trees currently, and then it comes out, and then they have to cut across in front of the cars. Now it's gradually coming out, and then it's going to just be in line, so now the cars have to cut across the bicyclists, which is safer because they're not having a bicyclist shoot out in front of them. They're more aware because they're adjacent to them. So this is current, the gray, where they're veering, and the proposed is to have it in line with the road, in line with the vehicles. And then this is the schedule, which has been updated since November, so it should have been included in the January. The BPAC met in November, so they didn't get to see the current one. And this is basically still on schedule. They're about a week behind. I believe so they're going to take it out of their updating their plans during this 95 to 100%. They needed more time based on doing a survey to get the spot shots of the detectable warning strip locations. And so now they have plans and they're able to incorporate some comments while we wait for more feedback. Does Gary or Mike have any comments?
Gary?
I can't see it.
Mike?
Oh, I don't know if they have like the digital copy.
Gary here.
Any comments?
Yeah, Mike here as well.
Any comments?
I can't really understand what anyone's saying. I don't even know what the subject matter is, so where in the agenda we are.
Okay, we were talking about the Middlefield Bicycle Lanes project.
Okay. So, no, by the way, I would be willing to donate a real audio conferencing system to the city to solve this problem.
Fair enough.
Just so you know, we have digital copies online. So if you go to the town website on the left side, they have the some highlight projects. So you can click on the.
Jennifer's really good at usually sending us.
She sent them to us.
I think I got it. I printed everything.
Just so like for being in Jamaica who
Yeah.
doesn't see it, you can also like just look at it online as well. Okay. And we have feedback from the PD department, just so you guys have some idea for the plans. We had some requests to see if we can have Marsh Road, this is Marsh Road, have this pocket be eliminated so that the left turn lane can be extended further. So that's one of the comments that have been given to the designers. The other comment was consistency with having the dash line across the intersections. One of the main purposes of originally doing the four that we currently have, which is at Marsh, we have James, Glenwood, and Ravenswood. It's just the approach for James and Glenwood, it has those gates, so they have sight distance when they come out, they can't see. So it's a way of warning them beforehand that they're approaching a bike lane. And then the angle for Ravenswood is not a straight alignment, so it's to direct them across to the right, to the lane that is across the street. And then here's just another major intersection where they're being pulled out, so it's directing them the rest of the way. I think that's it. If you don't have any comments, you can also email me comments if you see anything. So. All right, thank you.
Shall we move on to the police report for the month of January?
So for January, we didn't receive any traffic complaints. We made 3 arrests for driving under the influence, and none of the arrests were from traffic collisions. No truck stop details were performed. Our 2 traffic officers were assigned to the traffic division, and they rode their motorcycles and worked traffic enforcement as time and calls for service permitted. We had 13 traffic collisions, 4 involved injuries, 1 was a hit and run, and none involved anybody who was driving under the influence. And of those collisions, 3 occurred during the morning commute and 7 occurred during the afternoon commute. And we had 415 total traffic stops. For February, we received 3 traffic complaints, and those are all listed here on the sheet. 1 arrest was made for driving under the influence, and it did not result from a traffic collision. Our 3 motor officers, Officer Metzger, Gatto, and Reserve Officer Boyle, were assigned to traffic during the month, and again worked traffic enforcement on their motorcycles as time permitted. We had 8 traffic collisions, 1 involved injuries, 1 was a hit and run, and none involved the driver who was under the influence. 2 of those collisions occurred during the morning commute time, and 2 occurred during the afternoon commute time. And we had 443 total traffic stops for February.
So, are we seeing, I mean, not directly related to this, but are we seeing any significant impact of the Willow Road construction in terms of increased volume of traffic or incidents?
I don't know if Willow Road is creating it, but there is increased traffic in the town, all day long, especially during the morning and afternoon commutes, especially on Middlefield and El Camino and Alameda. Traffic has been increasing steadily over the past few years, and I don't expect it to, die down. I think it's probably only going to get worse, either maintain what it is or get worse with all the building that's going on all over the Bay Area and people moving in and, driving to work and stuff, and all the high-tech companies. They're using our roads to get to where they need to go. And, I think it's going to either maintain or get worse as we go on.
Despite every article we get in the paper every day, it talks about everybody leaving California because it's so bad and it's so bad. So,
I moved in.
No, I get the same thing. It's like you just keep hearing. There was a story this weekend about U-Haul. If you want to rent a U-Haul in San Francisco to leave, it costs $2,000. But if you're coming the opposite way, it's $200 or something.
Yeah.
All they pay you can't get. Yeah, they'll pay you to bring it.
Yeah. I think that traffic concern obviously is echoed by the whole council, and that it's, from what I've learned quickly, it's a frustrating part for everyone in that our town is basically set it's not going to grow, we aren't going to have growth. Whereas Redwood City, Menlo Park has a huge projects, it's going to continue. The frustrating part is it's hard to work with those cities and tell them to stop growing. It's not going to happen. But then we're dealt with the traffic issues in our town. So.
Yeah. Well, I love the irony recently and Mike, you must appreciate this, was the Green Hearts project and all the projects that were approved on El Camino and Menlo Park were approved even though environmental impact reports had significant impacts to Atherton, and they didn't request, they were not allowed to request money to mitigate those things. Went forward, and now the town of Menlo Park has withdrawn support for one of those projects because the county approved Stanford doing an expansion of the hospital and didn't take into account the impact of the effect of traffic in Menlo Park. And so the city council of Menlo Park is really upset about that, and so it's temporarily pulled one of the project, the big Stanford project on El Camino. I'm sure it's temporary, but it was just ironic that
yeah, and as you're all very aware, much more than I am. Of course, I've learned quickly, but traffic is our #1 complaint, and school safety it will continue to be, and that's really what probably drives a lot of most of our time in patrol and others, and unfortunately it takes away from limited resources to do proactive police work. But that's what is before us, and that's what we concentrate on, and our guys are on it, and they're doing a good job and responding where we need to go.
Yeah, I used to live on Selby Lane, and I was surprised to see, I used to see the amount of near pedestrian accidents, or near accidents and pedestrians, and that's why I'm always surprised to see the pedestrian accident number is so low. It's all vehicular and bicycle.
Yeah, we are very lucky, and I've been involved in a couple projects, I think as the sergeant has too, at Sylvia Lane School. Walking school bus routes, getting parents involved. They're doing a lot of different things to try to keep kids off that road. But then again, it's almost a rite of passage to walk to school.
Yeah.
You should be able to do that safely. But
and this isn't technically a meeting since we haven't had one, so there'll be no meeting minutes or anything like that. So responding to the woman's comments. I mean, the almanac gets traffic reports from the police department, don't they?
Well, yes and no. So it's a little more complicated than that. When we write a collision report, every collision report that we write, if it occurs in our town, then we send it to the CHP at the end of the month, and the CHP takes those collision reports and they enter them into their database, and that's how we can pull information on collisions. So we can either pull information from CHP, SWITRS directly, or we use a computer program called Crossroads to write our collision reports. And now with Crossroads, I can go in and generate the same SWITRS documents that I would normally get from CHP. If it is an outside assist report, like we take a report for another department because they're tied up or one of their officers is involved in a collision, even though we write the report, it actually belongs to that city, so we send that report to them, and then they're responsible for submitting it to SWITRS. That's not something that we do. The only thing that we don't have to submit is any report that's done on private property that doesn't involve an injury or a hit and run. So we don't have to submit those to SWITRS. When they talk about seeing things in the almanac, those are not stuff that we put in the almanac. We list, the almanac gets all of their information from what's called a daily press log, and that's mailed to the newspapers every morning, and that's all of the stuff that happens in town for the past 24 hours. The newspapers pick and choose what they want to put in. So they may put in an accident, they may put in a petty theft, they may put in a dog barking. But we don't direct them what to put in, they choose what to put in. And then every now and then they'll send us an email wanting more information on one incident or another incident. But that's how that stuff gets in the newspaper. It's not us doing it, it's the newspapers picking up our press log and putting in what they want.
And I think with this, I don't recall her name, but the mom's comments tonight about her son and the broken arm, I've heard that before. I believe that collision happened before I got here, and I did make myself a note because it got my attention to exactly find out what happened. It very likely maybe not even been reported to the police, and then she went after the fact. So there are some things that I'm going to look into about her comments to make sure they're accurate.
And you know, when you talk about underreporting, I mean, yes, if there is a very minor rear end collision with very, very little damage and the parties want to exchange information, then they exchange information, no report is generated, and therefore nothing gets sent up to SWITRS. So it doesn't show as a collision in our system. I'm not entirely sure, you know, she was talking about this collision, I'm not entirely sure where it happened at the intersection. It kind of almost seemed to me it happened in county area when she was talking, but I'm not.
It sounded like the driver was coming out of Selby westbound and turned right and hit her son as he was trying to cross.
It might have been. I mean, I'd have to look at it, but I was kind of looking at the map as she was speaking, and I'm kind of wondering exactly where did it happen. But regardless, if there was no collision report written on that, then yes, it wouldn't show up in our stats, and it might have showed up in the newspaper because what would show up on the press log would be an accident, parties exchange information, and then the press could choose to put that in or not put that in, whatever they wanted to do
But
with
if she
that.
came in and spoke to Officer Gavin and reported it,
The problem is we don't know the full text of that conversation.
yeah.
Like
So-
saying it could be after the fact.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But just so you know, when a collision involves injury, we're required to take a report that goes to CHP.
But it may have been, he may have taken it, but it was a county, and so it may have shown up in the county report part of it.
That's what I'm going to research, and I will find out.
Yeah. And then the other comment she made, did the comment about, well, we have, you know, we did all this, the safe schools thing, and we said we needed to put things in, you know, on Selby Lane, and I think we all love to do all the things those reports said, but we don't have enough money to do all of them. I think that's,
Sometimes you have to look at the data too and see, I mean, what are the facts, and are people dying or being injured, and they're not, fortunately, and so you have to look at that as well. What is the balance?
yeah, right. So, I think we all acknowledge we'd love to do something more significant on Selby Lane, but we have a lot of restrictions in terms of
Right.
what you can do with the size of the road and things like that. Just like you're doing your Middlefield project, there's only so many things you can do because of the trees and because of the property. And we'd love to have a right turn lane off of Atherton Avenue onto El Camino, right? The property there, basically.
Did you hear what her source was? I know she said that it wasn't included. Did she see the information provided by Mark Thomas, or was she just looking at the online source, or because there's multiple sources that are compiled for
She didn't specify.
Don't know. Yeah.
If she's only looking at one source, it probably wouldn't be there to be the county data, but that would be included into their analysis. So she saw theirs, then
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
So moving on, as of now, we're good for May
I
8th
think it was this year.
as the next meeting.
No, I think it was 10-2.
Gary?
16 or 17.
Gary, will you be back from Jamaica by
Can you
May?
check on that? and just-
As of now, are we good for May 8th?
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
As of now, are we good for May 8th as the next date of the meeting?
I'm looking. I will be in Japan.
Fair enough.
That's what I mean. I want to make sure that we're on it, because
Meeting adjourned? Well, yeah, we have to adjourn, so we'll do a really town meeting.
Yeah.